Hi everyone, welcome to the Resume and Cover Letter Writing Workshop for the College to Career Readiness Program, hosted by the Career Center here at Sacramento State. Today we're going to provide you with some ideas and suggestions and tips for writing resumes and cover letters, whether it's for a volunteer position, a part-time job, an internship, or a full-time career position. On the College to Career Readiness OrgSync website, we provided several handouts for you to download prior to watching this video. I will be referring to these handouts as we go through the presentation today. One of them is an example of a chronological resume. The second one is a combination resume. And then the third one is a handout on writing action-verb sentences in your resumes, and that's titled Verbalizing Your Accomplishments. So thank you, and we'll get started. Of course, the purpose of a resume has many purposes, and some of which include kind of summarizing your experiences that you've had prior to this point, your accomplishments, awards, honors, achievements, leadership skills in some cases, as well as paid or non-paid experiences in addition to accomplishments in terms of your degree and major accomplishments in school. What we try to do is tailor your resume to the job you're applying for, whether it's a volunteer, part-time, or internship position. And your cover letter, we want to do the same thing too. The nice thing about a resume is it really summarizes your accomplishments. And so in addition to being required to submit many times when you apply for a position, a resume and cover letter can be helpful to review prior to going into an interview, since it helps you remember some of the different things that you've accomplished and that you can talk about during the interview itself. To begin today, I'd like to refer to the two example resumes that you downloaded prior to watching the video today. One of them has the word sample on it, and that's an example of a chronological resume. And as you can see from this resume, there is each job that is listed on the sample is listed separately, and you actually read the action verb sentences underneath each position. There are 3 of them on this example. A chronological resume is a good resume to use this format if you have any experiences at all that relate to the job that you're applying for. Many first-year and second-year students will do a chronological resume even if they've had just several volunteer or part-time positions. Later, if you are applying for a position where you've acquired internships related to the job you're applying for, a chronological resume works great. Also, in a chronological resume, you may divide the work experience section into 2 parts. For example, let's say you were a business student major in marketing, had a concentration in marketing, and you had a marketing internship, then you actually could, in a chronological resume, say marketing experience, and then you could have your marketing internship. And then let's say you had 2 part-time jobs while you were in school, then you could have a separate section that said additional experience. So you'd have marketing experience and then one that said additional experience, and then you'd put your 2 part-time jobs under there, for example. As you progress in your careers, you will be able to use a chronological resume most of the time because you'll have experience that relates to the position you're applying for. The second resume that I attached is called a combination style. And as you can see from the example, this has 3 skill categories that relate to the job you're applying for. So when you put yours together, if you use a combination style, it won't have these 3 skill categories necessarily. It'll have skill categories that relate to the position you're applying for. A combination resume works very nicely if you're applying for a position where you don't have experience related to the job, but you have transferable skills from school as well as paid or non-paid experiences that you can put under the 3 skill categories that relate to the position you're applying for. In a combination resume, you always have work history underneath the skill categories. You just don't list what you did underneath each job because the action verb sentences are listed underneath each skill category. Also, on the 2 examples that I've listed, I want you to notice the heading. If we go back to the chronological resume, the heading is at the top of the page. Usually it's about 0.7 inches from the top, and then the left and right margins are around 0.9, and the bottom is 0.6. Usually you can use 11-point font. We recommend Times New Roman. Notice how there's a tab about the 3rd letter over, and everything lines up on that first tab, and then we tab in again for the action verb sentences, as you can see on the example. We don't recommend using any italics if possible, and kind of minimal with the bolding. The major headings you can see are in all capital letters and bolded, and then the subheadings and job titles are also bolded. We reserve bullet statements just for the action verb sentences, not other areas or major headings within the resume if you prefer that. So you can kind of see the overall format. It's single spaced except double spaced before each major heading, and double space between jobs or entries within a heading. So anyway, so that's the difference between chronological and combination. Generally, employers like chronological resumes a little bit better, but they'll certainly accept combination resumes. For accounting students, for example, a combination resume works pretty nicely because the first major skill area can be accounting, and then you can list what projects and assignments you've had in your accounting classes to demonstrate the technical skills related to accounting. And then you could have, for example, client relations or customer service and then leadership as the other 2 skill categories. Okay. The next 2 slides kind of go over the advantages and disadvantages of the chronological as well as the combination resume. Next, I'd like to just outline for you and remind you that experiences that you have in school are very, very important, and they can go on your resume also. So, for example, internships or volunteer experiences, community service through the Community Engagement Center, projects or group work or assignment, lab courses, student clubs and organizations. These are all areas that are really good information to go on your resume. Writing an action verb sentence is very important on a resume. We'd recommend that if possible, we'd like you to quantify it or qualify it, show results if possible, and start the sentences with action verbs rather than with personal pronouns, which we leave off in a resume. And you end the action verb sentences with periods. Either just be consistent. If you use periods, that's fine, or no periods at all. If that's also okay, as long as you're consistent with all of them the same way. So when writing an action verb sentence, I am going to show you kind of how a sentence can be built. So here in the first example, someone typed or brought in their resume and it said taught a technical workshop. So you may wonder what type of workshop, who taught it, what was it for, what type of technical workshop was it. So as we develop the action verb sentence, you can see we add a series of additional information where now it reads designed and taught a 10-week training session for consulting department employees on web-based video production. Very good sentence. We recommend that they're not more than 2 lines long. And you can see that it's much more detailed and much more interesting for the reader. Here's another one. This one says wrote articles. And you can see it goes from that to the more developed one. This one's a little bit long, but you can see wrote and edited an article, the name of the article, for which journal, with a circulation of 50,000. So that's pretty good. There are numerous categories on a resume. This is a list of some sample resume categories that you can consider when putting your resume together. Here's page 2 with some additional ones. What I'm going to do today is highlight the ones that are pretty routine, pretty common on a resume, and then you can add additional categories or change them depending on your unique needs and the field that you're applying to or position you're applying to. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to proceed through the resume and talk about each section of the resume and give you some pointers about it. So the first section is the heading at the top of the resume. What we recommend is you place the heading, which includes your name, address, city, state, zip, phone number, and email, as well as your LinkedIn account if you have one. That's at the top of your resume. That same heading is also used for your cover letter as well as your reference sheet. Those are 3 different documents. A very important point is make sure your phone message on your phone is professional and that your email is professional. If your email is something like I love to party at csus.edu, that's not good. So employers are going to be contacting you, whether it's your phone number or email, to get a hold of you, so they must be professional. In some cases, we do recommend it's okay to leave your specific street address off the resume, particularly if you're applying for a company that's not well known, or, for example, in some cases and some job posting sites, you just want to maintain your security and confidentiality in terms of your specific street address until later in the process, maybe on an application or later. But it's common to leave it off in some cases. If you're applying for a very well-known company or someone through the Career Center that we've vetted, then it's probably okay. It's okay in that case. The next section is called the objective. Now, the objective is not required on a resume because in your cover letter you're going to indicate which position you're applying for anyway. But these are some examples of an objective on a resume that you can use. It's pretty simple to obtain such and such a position with so-and-so. Pretty basic. It doesn't have to be elaborate or long. The second example on this page is a little bit long, but you can add a skill set that relates to the job to the objective if you would like. Under education, we include your degree, and it can be the degree that you're working on. So, for example, if you are in a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies with a concentration in organizational communications and a minor in Spanish, let's say, you're working on that at California State University in Sacramento, and then you can put expected, as you can see in the second example, and you can indicate your graduation date projected out in terms of what you anticipate it being. You certainly can indicate your concentration right after the degree program that you're in, as well as, or you can list it, as you can see in the second example, concentration : and then you can list it there. There are subcategories within education, so you can see from the 2 handouts that I passed out earlier that there are subcategories under education. You can see there's honors, computer skills, language skills, and research. Notice how there's a tab that's set and they all line up in the same place. The subcategories are bolded. These are kind of a nice section. Not all students have information that can go within these subcategories, and you might only have one subcategory, not more than one. But take a look at the ones that are on the screen and you'll be able to decide one or more categories that you may want to use. As you can see from this slide, it kind of shows you how the subcategories are listed. You can see how they're formatted on the 2 resumes that I discussed earlier. In the work experience section, what we want to try to do, we recommend listing action-verb sentences that really relate to the job that you're applying to. So let's say you had a restaurant job and you had some leadership, you supervised, you trained new employees, and the job you're applying for incorporates some of those skills too. So you would talk about those things in the action-verb sentences and not everything that you've done. So we try to tailor the action-verb sentences to the position that you're applying to. In a skill-based resume or combination resume, as I discussed earlier, you have 3 skill categories that relate to the job you're applying for, and then work history right after. Here are some additional resume categories that you certainly can include. Just as a suggestion, we recommend that bullet statements aren't used. They just line up at the first tab for most of these, as you can see from the examples. But each of you, your resume, maybe you've developed your resume already and you want to bring it into the Career Center, which is okay. We have drop-in hours Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 during the fall and spring semesters, and 8 to 4 during the summer. And you can have your resume and cover letter critiqued, and we'd be happy to look at it for you. Another section on your resume that can be very valuable to include is any leadership experiences that you've acquired while you've been in school or outside school. Leadership experiences can take many forms. You can be in a club or organization and hold an officer position. You can volunteer in the community. You can be a project leader or a project lead, and a project is through one of your classes. We also have a number of leadership opportunities here at Sacramento State. For example, the Leadership Initiative through student organizations and leadership, or being an orientation leader or a peer mentor. So these are some examples of how leadership can be included on your resume. This first one on this slide talks about a leadership profile, and this can take the place of the objective on your resume and can include 2 to 4 specific leadership experiences that one might have. So it's referred to as a leadership profile. In addition, you might be involved in the community in a leadership position or in a student club or organization, as you can see under activities, or you might have attended a professional development conference that had a leadership component to it too. So not all students have had the opportunity to develop leadership skills. However, we recommend, if at all possible, to stretch a little bit if you are a little hesitant and try to gain some leadership skills while you've been at Sacramento State. In addition to your resume, we recommend that you have a separate sheet that is listed as references. And your references are important for positions that you're applying for, so you want to be ready in case the employer asks for them. Most of the time they'll have a space on the application, but just in case, you can have a separate piece of paper that has a heading at the top and your references listed on the piece of paper with a heading on the piece of paper called references. I have attached a separate reference sheet also, so you can see an example of how the reference sheet is organized. You'll be able to download that also on the list of handouts that I provided on the College to Career Readiness Program website for references. In addition, I've kind of talked about printing and the fonts and the length. 2 pages on your resume are okay. Generally, we try to stick to 1 page for undergraduate students. Most graduate students often have 2, but if you have quite a bit of experience, it is a little bit better to have it on 2 pages rather than just 1. If you have a second page, you do want to list your name and page 2 on the upper right-hand corner of the second page, and you want to continue the heading. For example, if you said work experience and you had part of it on page 1 and then get continued on page 2, then you'd want to have work experience continued as a major heading and then continue listing some of your work experience. Cover letters are an essential part when you apply for a position. It really helps project a little bit more of a professional persona by including a cover letter. We have a Career Center handbook that is available online and through our Career Center. And in the back of that handbook, we have an example, kind of an outline that lists kind of what goes in a cover letter, and also a couple examples of cover letters, the second of which is pretty good for a general cover letter and how it's formatted and what goes in the cover letter. Again, the cover letter is usually all left justified. It has the same heading as your resume, and it's usually in the same size font. Usually if your resume is an 11 point, your cover letter is also. Sometimes you will, when you apply for a position, you'll create a PDF document where page 1 is the cover letter and page 2 is the resume that you upload to the employer or attach as a document in your email. So that's a quick overview of resumes and cover letters for today. As part of your completion of the requirements for the College to Career Readiness program, we'd like you to upload a draft of your cover letter after you've had it reviewed. Once you have received some feedback on it, be sure and upload it as part of your requirements to receive credit for this milestone in the College to Career Readiness program. Thank you very much.